Besides peregrine falcons, what else would a raptor be? Yes, in the back.
Barn owls.
Barn owls. Very good. So any of the owls, what else?
Vultures and falcons.
Vultures and falcons, what else?
Bald eagle.
Bald eagles. And there's one more group, hawks. So we've got hawks, owls, eagles, falcons, and then for us in North America, we're considering turkey vultures part of the raptor group. And that is because they all have the sharp curved hook beak that helps them to grip and tear into their food. They don't have teeth, like some animals that are meat eaters do. They all have the sharp, powerful talons, or the nails that are on their feet. And with him, he is missing two on his right foot, which is why I use him for education. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit too. Now, vultures don't have the gripping, powerful feet, but they do have the sharp beak part, and they definitely have the really good eyesight, and definitely are meat eaters. Now, how about somebody else? Yes?
Rodents.
Rodents? Well, if they really had to, and I certainly feed my bird rodents. He gets that as part of his diet, but what's another group of animals that you might see floating around in the wind out there, like blue jays and chickens? Well, chickadees. Sorry, I thought you said chickens. Yeah, they don't eat chickens, but they do eat chickadees. They basically are bird-eating birds. So any of the bird-eating birds are quite a bit different than things like red-tailed hawks. The red-tails or any of the bootios, the soaring hawks, have very broad, round-shaped wings, and they have very thick, fat toes. That's their primary mechanism to be able to catch things. They need really powerful toes to be able to hold on to things like rabbits, squirrels, gophers, things along those lines. But falcon, kind of in the middle size range of them. They go anywhere from a little tiny kestrel that only weighs about 1/4 of a pound, all the way up to big female gyrfalcon that can be over 4 pounds in size. They also, all with falcons, and with him you can kind of see it on his left side, since that's the side facing you, is he has a beak. When it curves down, it forms a notch. So there's like this little square or a tooth, and then the beak continues. So that notch helps him if when he grabs his food. Another name for a peregrine falcon is duck hawk, because of what they hunt. So if he's going to hunt a duck, he's only a little over 1 pound in size. Ducks weigh much more than that. So he needs to be able to kill his food fairly quickly. He can't wait around even a couple of minutes because his food doesn't want to get eaten. He wants to eat his food. So what he can do with that tooth or that notch in his beak is snap the vertebrae of his prey on his tooth. So that's something only the 5 different groups of, or 5 different species of falcons found here in North America have. So if you look at a red tail, look at their feet, look at their beak, and they're going to look completely different. Like I said, hawks have very round, narrow, or broad wings. He has very pointed wings. He's built for speed. So if you kind of think of different kinds of airplanes, he would be a fighter plane. He would be something like a P-51 Mustang that was used in World War II. They're very maneuverable. He can spin on a dime. He can fly at over 200 miles an hour in a dive or a stoop to catch his prey. Red-tailed tooth, and having the long pointed wings, he is very adept at hunting other birds. The problem that peregrines ran into, though, was they started eating those birds that were eating bugs, that were eating plants that were sprayed with a pesticide called DDT. So with that DDT, it just worked its way up through the food chain in the bodies of the food the birds were eating. And when the adult birds would come back and sit on those eggs, the eggshells would be very thin, and the eggshells would crack and break. So basically, by 1962, we lost our last peregrine falcon east of the Mississippi River. It really is a life form. It takes over everything because unlike having a dog or a cat that you can leave with the kid next door, you can't do that with your birds. If I want to travel, I have to find another falconer that has the right facilities, has the experience, that can handle and take care of my birds if I want to go away. If I want to go away on vacation and I can't find somebody, the birds end up coming with me and my car is loaded down. It's just kind of the way it is. But we're breeding them. So now that peregrines have been so successful, they've moved on to other things. But the thing that's unique about this recovery program is that it's basically due to falconers. This is not something that Fish and Wildlife or Minnesota DNR or any of the DNRs did to actively help the birds with a release program. Some of those states certainly have contributed funds to help out with the purchase of young birds, but basically it was the falconers who gave their birds for breeding and said, do whatever you need to make sure we have peregrines back on the cliffs. That was their goal. That's my goal. I bred about a dozen babies that year. So they had releases they were doing in New York. They gave us a couple of birds, and unfortunately, 2 of those babies within a very short time period were killed by great horned owls. What we were doing, people like peregrines. They're cool, they're fast, they're pretty. They kill pigeons, you know, there's a wide variety of reasons that people like them. And so one by one, other states started joining in, got on board, and within about 10, 12 years, we didn't have a need to release any more captively raised birds. They were doing it all on their own, which is a true sign of success. Once they don't need help from us, they can kind of take care of things on their own. And the peregrine falcon is one of the few recovery stories where peregrines went on the list, they were protected, and they came off the list, August of 1999. So just like gray wolves, just like bald eagles, they have made a tremendous comeback in a very short period of time. A little peregrine named Maverick. And I have been volunteering ever since. You know, I continue to get whacked in the head by birds. I climb out on cliffs. I get bit and footed, and I love it. I do it for no money whatsoever. Minnesota, along with Wisconsin, are the only 2 states where we don't have the monitoring being done by the state. In Minnesota, it's not done by the state because we had Dr. Tordoff to do it for us for so long. He was retired by then. By the time this project got started, he could lead this whole process moving forward. Minutes for peregrines. From there, I try and figure out when they're on eggs. From when they're on eggs, I start figuring out when those eggs are going to hatch, getting the bands identified, and I forgot my bands in my car, so I might give my keys to Mike. The dog Bob Anderson was one of the first people to breed peregrines in the Midwest, and he continues to be involved with dozens of sites throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. But shortly after he fledged, he collided with a building, most likely. And by hitting that building going as fast as he did, he basically crushed the outer tips of 2 of his toes. 70% of the birds die their first year, between 50 and 70%. So with that injury, he has some balance issues because he has a real hard time holding on to anything with that right foot, that the Raptor Center determined that he would not be able to be re-released, but he can still fly. So I acquired him on my permit. It's a permit that I have both from Fish and Wildlife and the state of Minnesota. I do not own him. I have to feed him, I have to provide housing, if something happens to him, I have to do all of that. But he technically is not my bird. But I do have all the paperwork that makes it legal for me to have him, kind of leave it at that. They don't make good pets at all. They make lousy pets. He puts up with me is about the best thing I can say, because I'm the lesser of 2 evils, and I provide food, is about the only thing. I'll pass around the bands. These are the bands that we use on the birds. The bottom 4 bands are the federal bands, and we put 2 bands on our birds. One band is the federal band that all birds are marked with, regardless of the species, if they're going to be banded by any biologist. The top one is a male band. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are female bands. The males in the raptor world are considerably smaller than what the females are. So when we're banding the chicks, we need to do it at an age where we can pretty accurately tell if it's going to be a male or a female adult. The bands are so that, though, if you make a mistake, it probably is not going to be the end of the world, but if we have any doubt at all whether that chick is a male or female, we automatically band it as a female, just to be on the safe side. The legs are nearly adult size when we band them at 3 weeks of age. We like to band them at 3 weeks of age because we can pretty accurately guess whether it's a male or female, or know whether it's a male or female. And the birds can't fly yet. They're pretty immobile. They just sit there, they hiss, They don't know how to use their feet. They really don't know how to bite, except for the birds at Queen's Bluff. Females at Queen's Bluff draw blood every single year. And they are some of the largest female peregrines I've ever worked with, and are so large that they almost don't fit into the peregrine-sized band around their leg. One year we could not federally ban them because their legs were so thick the band would not spin on the leg. So this bottom band, when you look at it, has a whole bunch of numbers on it. If it's 10 feet away, you're never going to read it with your eye. So what we do is we put a second band on the bird, either black over red or black over green for us here in the Midwest. And that tells us it's a Midwest bird or an Eastern recovery bird. They use a different color in the Rocky Mountains and a third different color out on the West Coast. So it's a different combination of letters or numbers, either upright or tipped on its side. And then the top two bands are from Canada, since they also participate in the federal monitoring program and our recovery program. If we see a solid black or a solid red band, we know that bird is a Canada bird. So right away I can tell if it's an Eastern bird, if it's a Canada bird, or if it's unbanded, then that really drives me nuts because I want to know everything about the species. But I can read this band up to 700 feet away with a spotting scope. Sometimes it takes me 30, 40 hours to get a band read because the bird doesn't put that leg down, it's really windy, the bird is preening, it's sleeping, it's raining, whatever it may be. Or I can get a band read in 30 seconds. It really depends on just having the luck. So if you want to pass those around, and then Mike will pick it up at the end. I'm going to take the hood off. What we call a bait. And the baiting, he can't, number one, fly anywhere. So if you're afraid of birds or nervous about birds, he can't land on your head or do anything like that. It's my job to make sure he doesn't get loose. And then we'll kind of just have him kind of settle in. The hood I use to help keep him calm in transport, because basically he just sits on the perch in the back of my car, is how he rides. That's how pretty much most of my birds ride. The hawks don't, because the hawks poop farther out. Falcons poop straight down. So I can keep my car a little bit cleaner when the hawk is in a box. But this is first year, going on the second year, male peregrine falcon. He's right about 650 grams, about a pound and a quarter in size. That's fine. Peregrine males also, or any male falcon or male raptor, depending on who you are, will often call it a tiercel. And the word tiercel means 1/3. And the history going back to that, the English, they got very weird, bizarre names for a lot of our falconry terms. It basically comes from the size 1/3, meaning 1/3 smaller, and we've just continued to use that term. He's kind of in between his molt. He has pretty much 90–95% of his back and primary and tail feathers are all adult coloration with that slate gray, but then the top of his head is still brown and his belly feathers are still kind of that immature plumage brown color. He should finish out his molt pretty soon. He started his molt early in April, and then he kind of stopped in about September. And some people's theory with some peregrines, because they're highly migratory, they get their flight feathers molted in, they migrate, and then they finish out the molt when they get to their final migration spot. Some of our birds here in the Midwest migrate, and some don't. A lot of the city birds actually never leave. There's tons of food available in downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. Probably the Winona birds do not migrate. There's probably enough pigeons down there for them. But birds up on Lake Superior cliffs are probably going to have to migrate. A lot of the songbirds and things that they primarily feed off of are going to take off for the winter. And those birds will then come back in early March, certainly by April at the latest. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
What's the